Football is the biggest sport in the world, and with that, every outside influence wants their foot in the game. Social and political issues will constantly try to get their share of the limelight, but maybe the most immoral has to be gambling. Especially in the UK, you'll struggle to watch a game without the influence of football betting. So let's take a look at how gambling hijacked football. The first question you might ask is, how are they hijacking football? And it's a great question because so many other brands, they advertise within football, don't they? Even states and oligarchs, they use football teams to sometimes spread their message and even their ideology. However, I would say gambling is the most harmful to the person watching the game directly, because you're not going to watch a Man City Arsenal game and go, oh, I need to book a flight with Etihad Airways. Even alcohol sponsors, which I bet loads of people will compare this to. Yes, there are big issues with that. However, if you don't have any beers in the fridge, you can't then go order them and then drink it within 20 seconds. Whereas we all have a casino in our pocket nowadays. It's so accessible. And like I say, it's absolutely everywhere. I mean, just take the Premier League, for example. I'm going to sound like such a broken record because I've said this loads and loads of times before. But this Premier League season, there will be 11 teams out of 20 with a gambling sponsor on them. That's over half of the teams in the Premier League. It's not a gambling sponsor, maybe on the advertising boards or even on the sleeves. Their main sponsor on their shirt is a gambling site. And this is just my personal opinion, but they're all weird, unknown gambling sites that barely anyone uses, and they look so tacky on a football shirt. I'm not saying that Bet365 or Sky Bet or Betfair would look good on a shirt. However, it looked better than some of these. But I do think the main issue with the shirt sponsors, it's little kids, isn't it? Because, let's face it, either directly or indirectly, they are advertising to little kids. I don't think it's fair on anyone, including adults, that they are just getting absolutely bombarded with gambling ads. But as you get older and older, your brain obviously develops more. However, with little kids, so impressionable, and I just find it so rich that the Premier League is becoming so much more family friendly, isn't it? It's like the WWE. The 90s was the cool era of the WWE with The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin, but they went all family friendly so they could sell Doritos and Prime and stuff like that. But despite football kicking out hooliganism, alcohol, really any emotion in the game, they've sold their soul to gambling sites. The FA won't allow gambling sponsors on the front of kids' football shirts. Brilliant. Fantastic. But it's a ridiculous rule because players like Tyler Diblin, for example, plays for Southampton, and he broke into the first team whilst he was under 18. Yet he was wearing, his shirt will be getting sold in the club shop with a gambling sponsor on it. It just absolutely baffles me how it feels there's like no regulation on this at all. And you look at kid shirts. For example, take me. I was 5'10" to 6 foot when I was about 14, 15. So I wasn't buying a kid's football shirt. I was buying a men's football shirt, and you can guarantee the part-time Sports Direct worker isn't going to ID you, are they? They're not going to turn you away and go, no, you can't buy that shirt because it's got a gambling sponsor on it. By the way, I'm not saying I want that to happen. I'm just saying it's a hollow gesture by the FA to stop these sponsors going on shirts when realistically it makes no difference. And you also have to look at it, merchandise that is getting sold to little kids, they don't remove the sponsors off the football shirts. Trading cards, magazines, even if you play FIFA, for example, which is an age rating of 3, they have all the sponsors on there. If a little kid has a poster of Ollie Watkins on the wall, he'll have a sponsor of that Betano or whatever Villa have now. You know what I think it's quite similar to? Smoking ads in like the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s. They could all say they weren't trying to get kids into smoking, and that, I guarantee, was the defence through all of human history. But when you have like cartoon characters smoking in adverts, then it doesn't take a genius to work out what they're doing. And I'm not saying Betfair and Sky Bet and Bet365 are all sitting in boardrooms going, right, we want 8-year-olds to learn how to gamble. I'm just saying I don't think it's a coincidence how all of these sponsors are plastered on little kids' walls or our TV screens or our video games. But we'll move on to the hypocrisy with the footballers. Because, it seems like such a long time ago, Ivan Toney, he got banned, and now he plays in Saudi Arabia, but remember he got banned for Brentford and couldn't play for about 8 months. It also came out during his ban that apparently he'd been diagnosed with a gambling addiction. So let's just sympathise with him for a second. You're addicted to betting, the team you play for has a betting logo on their shirt, followed by countless ads around the stadium. Every advert prior to the game halftime, and after are full of gambling ads, and then they ban you for betting. I'm 100% not saying that a footballer should be allowed to bet on any games, especially their own. However, as we said at the time, we all can acknowledge how ridiculous it is. It was the same with Tonali, and there always is a bit of you as a football fan going, you're earning so much money, why do you bet? Why do you ruin your career over betting? But obviously, that's not how addiction works, and you can be as ignorant as you want to it. I would hate to be a gambling addict whilst also promoting gambling. To me, I'm just getting bored of getting lectured by the Premier League, the FA, all these football teams on how it needs to be more family friendly, essentially taking away the soul of football, whilst on the sly, basically just promoting these dodgy gambling sites. Stake, for example. Stake had so much criticism over the last year, and they're sponsoring Everton. And if you don't know, it's an Australian betting company, and they were doing things like having watermarks over loads of social media posts, which one, it was just really irritating to see. But it was also that time where I believe they sponsored a post or created a post about Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi's sons scoring loads of goals. I mean, it's a fake post, but they did it to get their name out there, get the brand out there. I even read that Stake stopped their operations in the UK, so to be honest, it baffles me why they're on the front of the Everton shirt. But we'll move on to football media. And let me ask you a question. Have you ever watched The Overlap or the Stick to Football podcast? Gary Neville is doing and has done a fantastic job of his own football media company. And his Stick to Football podcast is, in my opinion, the best one in the world at the moment, covering the Premier League or English football. Oh my days. I feel in the last couple of years, the betting ads have become absolutely relentless.
To you by Sky Bet, brought to you by Sky Bet.
They're brought to you by Sky Bet.
People say, well, it's not aimed at kids, and I'd kind of argue that a bit. I think it is a 14 and upwards programme, especially the fan debate. I'd say the fan debate is a very young demographic. But regardless if it's aimed at kids or not, and I'll concede just for argument's sake that it's not, you just can't get away from the ads. And this is just a personal opinion. I like Gary Neville, but I do find it very hypocritical when he does like to preach a lot. He preached about the Qatar World Cup and then went over there, and he preaches so much about social issues and everything like that. But to me, gambling is a massive issue, especially in the UK, especially with young males. And there he is on every bit of media he does, constantly promoting Sky Bet. I think the most interesting one in the last year or so is Super 6. You'll see on the Stick to Football podcast they have a sponsored Super 6 segment. And if you don't know, this is an app, it's a part of Sky Bet, and it's where you can predict English football scores across the weekend. It's a free-to-play game and you can win money with it. And now they've kind of turned it into a bit of a fancy football game. And people say it's free-to-play, so what is the harm? Well, Sky Bet aren't doing it out of the goodness of the heart. They're not spending tens of millions of pounds a year on marketing Super 6 just because it's a laugh. They know what it does. It filters people from that to Sky Bet. It's even to the extent where they've made it into a bit of a fantasy football league now, where they can bring people back to it. The thing is, I'm not criticising the game. I like the game. However, it's just the adverts that are constantly pushing this on so many people. I just personally think it is so tasteless now, and it's like guerrilla marketing, isn't it? They just go absolutely mental at the audience and force it down your throat. It's weird, isn't it? Because you'll hear so many people nowadays saying social issues are jumping on football, political issues are jumping on football, and I won't disagree with that. However, barely anyone talks about the gambling issues that are completely jumping on football. It's even podcasts like The Athletic. I'm a huge fan of The Athletic podcast. I think it's brilliant. They discuss really interesting issues and they have people that know what they're talking about. But again, you got to call it out. You can't do podcasts criticising the Sandro Tonali issue, but then have Betfair adverts constantly running on all the episodes.
Our partners at Betfair relish the plot twist that football's 10th running delivers.
I believe a couple of years ago, Bet365 literally had a segment on it telling you what were the best odds for the weekend. That's completely fine if you are listening to a betting show, you know, if they're predicting the weekend scores. But if you're trying to listen to essentially a football news show, it does just feel, again, like it's being hijacked. Look, we all know why they do it, because betting companies pay the most money. And you could probably argue their return on investment is the most quickest out of all the industries. They can get in your head, they can give you the free bet, and then boom, you are in, and you might be locked in for life. Football is becoming so much more progressive nowadays in a lot of good ways, but gambling and betting, it feels like it's in the 1970s still. Do you remember that Ladbrokes ad, which was, I think it was supposed to be a bit of like a Reservoir Dogs-esque kind of ad. It had loads of different personalities, and it was a fun ad to watch, but it glorified gambling. That was the issue with it. Well, it feels like that, rightly so, got criticised, but what about like Paddy Power? Paddy Power make brilliant adverts, they're quite funny. What is it, like the Super Sub at the moment, you'll see, is it the Sub Door? Their marketing team are brilliant, but they're glorifying gambling, aren't they? They're not doing these adverts to kind of go, do it at your own risk. And again, I think it's similar to the regulation of having no gambling sponsors on little kids' shirts. They gamble responsibly at the end. You can't do like a Steven Spielberg-esque advert and go, well, gamble responsibly. My guess in the future is eventually all of these gambling ads, I think they will go a similar way to cigarette ads nowadays. You can't glorify cigarettes. If you buy a packet of cigarettes, they have, horrible pictures on them. I'm not saying a gambling sponsor is going to be something like that, but I think we are in the absolute peak of gambling and betting ads within football. I enjoy putting a bet on sometimes. I enjoy putting a knacker on a weekend. I'm not criticising people who do, because it's your life, do whatever you want. It's the advertising that I'm going for, and I think it is getting so tasteless and it's just not subtle anymore. I felt like it used to be a bit more subtle, but now, good lord, I mean, everywhere you look, on a football game or on a football podcast or anything, you can't get away from it. And finally, it is ruining cool football shirts, because there are a lot of good Premier League shirts this season with rubbish, weird, boring, just pathetic gambling sponsors on there. But let me know what you think. This kind of turned into more of a rant than a well thought out video, but I think I got my point across well in that. You tell me, what do you think of gambling sponsors? Are they too much? Do you think they're completely fine? Leave a comment below, leave a like, if you subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.